Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Syed Mostafa Safavi, and you're listening to our podcast series on deep learning for intrusion detection. In this series, we explore how cutting-edge AI techniques are reshaping the way we detect and respond to cybersecurity threats. This podcast is produced with the valuable support of Alicia Tan, who has been instrumental in coordinating and preparing each episode. Now, let's get started and dive into today's topic. All right, let's jump right in. So we're looking at a comprehensive layout starting from the basics of linear regression and moving through logistic regression, regularization methods, and even onto non-parametric algorithms like naive Bayes and k-nearest neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about this content, the first thing that stands out is how linear regression is presented as a foundational tool for modeling the relationship between features and targets by minimizing the sum of squared errors.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like you have your coefficients that are determined so that the error, which we call the sum of squared error, is as low as possible. And, that SSE becomes our guiding cost function, sort of the heartbeat
Definitely.
of linear regression.
Now, what's interesting is how the discussion contrasts linear regression with logistic regression. Linear regression is great for continuous outcomes, but for classification, it really falls short because predictions can exceed the expected range.
Right. And that's why they introduced logistic regression. It uses the sigmoid function to compress any input into a nice range between 0 and 1. It's like mapping the endless line of linear predictions into a probability space that makes sense for binary classification.
Exactly. And that brings up another cool point: the distinction between parametric and non-parametric algorithms. Parametric ones, like our linear and logistic regression models, assume a fixed form for the relationship in the data. They're fast and work with less data, but can be in danger of underfitting sometimes.
Yeah. On the flip side, non-parametric algorithms, such as the k-nearest neighbors model, don't make any strong assumptions about the data.
Right.
They're super flexible and can capture more complex relationships, but then you're facing issues like overfitting and requiring a lot more data. Plus, the curse of dimensionality can hit them hard.
Exactly. And speaking of overfitting, the discussion highlights regularization techniques as a deliberate attempt to control that. Lasso and ridge regression are mentioned, each adding a penalty term to the cost function.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting how Lasso uses the absolute values of coefficients, potentially zeroing out less important features, while ridge goes with the squared values, which shrinks but doesn't completely eliminate them. This balance between complexity and simplicity is key in model building.
I find it fascinating that they use a fuel efficiency prediction as an example for demonstrating both linear and polynomial regression. You effectively see how a slight twist, like moving from a simple straight line to a degree 3 polynomial curve, can capture nonlinear relationships in real-world data.
True. Yeah. It's like if you're trying to capture the behavior of a car's fuel efficiency, a simple line might miss those little curves and dips in the data, but a polynomial model adds that extra nuance.
Right. Now, as we dig a bit into the logistic regression part, it's emphasized again that after applying the sigmoid function, predictions become probabilities, which is exactly what you need for binary classifications.
Yeah. But what's particularly smart is how the content explains that the logistic model adjusts the cost function to work specifically with these probability outputs. It leads us into gradient descent, the iterative
Yeah.
process to find the best coefficient values.
Exactly. Gradient descent, by iteratively adjusting parameters, ensures the algorithm steadily converges to a minimum error point. And while it's a simple idea, the iterative aspect often makes it feel like the algorithm is learning in real time.
Absolutely. Then we shift our focus beyond regression to classification techniques like naive Bayes. This algorithm, though labeled naive due to its strong independence assumption among features, often performs surprisingly well despite that simplification.
Yeah, think about it. Assuming feature independence is a bold assumption, almost like saying one ingredient in a cake doesn't affect the rest. But in many cases, it works magnificently, especially in real-time or text classification tasks.
True. Right, exactly. And it's widely used for spam detection, sentiment analysis, and news categorization. Even if it's simplistic, its robustness and speed make it a go-to model for many real-world applications.
Yup. Now, circling back to K nearest neighbors, the content highlights how this algorithm doesn't really train in the traditional sense, but rather uses the entire training set during prediction time. It's more of a lazy learner, as they put it.
Right. It calculates distances between the new data point and all known instances using a technique like Euclidean distance, then decides the class label by a voting mechanism among its nearest neighbors.
It reminds me of asking your closest friends for advice, where you trust the consensus. But of course, storing all that data and computing it every time can be quite resource-heavy.
Exactly. And that's why choosing the right K value is so crucial. Too small, and you risk misclassification due to noise. Too large, and you might wash out important local differences. It's a trade-off, much like picking the right pair of shoes. You can't be too tight or too loose.
Yeah, and then there's the curse of dimensionality. As the number of features increases, the notion of closeness starts to break down. That's why feature selection becomes an essential task in high-dimensional spaces.
Totally, yeah. So, we've seen that these algorithms basically cover a spectrum from simpler parametric approaches to more flexible, non-parametric ones. Each has its own strengths and potential pitfalls.
Right, now, let's challenge a point here. Some might argue that parametric models like linear regression are too inflexible, given real-world data rarely follows perfect linear patterns.
I see where you're coming
They're
from,
still
but
incredibly valuable for building intuition and as a benchmark for more complex models.
yeah, exactly. And when linear models fall short, techniques like regularization or feature transformation can help extend their applicability. Basically, you start with something simple and then build complexity gradually as needed.
I also find the explanation of the gradient descent process refreshing. It demystifies the idea that learning is always complex. Basically, you're just taking small steps towards reducing error, like descending a hill, one small step at a time.
Absolutely, yeah. Right? And it's interesting that they emphasize the importance of setting the gradient to 0 to find the minimum of the cost function. It's the math behind determining the best fit.
Indeed. Now, in terms of logistic regression, it's a clever adaptation of the linear model for classification tasks. Instead of regressing on an unbounded scale, it squishes the outputs into that neat probability range with the sigmoid
That's
function.
spot on, yeah? And don't forget, for problems with more than two classes, logistic regression can be extended through the softmax function. This change allows it to predict a probability distribution across multiple classes.
Right. It's like expanding a binary yes-no model into a multiple-choice quiz where each answer has a certain likelihood. And that's pretty powerful, especially in applications like image or speech recognition.
Absolutely. Now, stepping back, The architecture of these models, whether it's the transformation of features in nonlinear settings or the addition of penalty terms for regularization, shows how versatile machine learning really is.
Yeah, exactly. True. And all these techniques are, building blocks. You can mix and match them to suit your specific problem. For example, using a polynomial transformation to capture nonlinearity in linear regression is a neat trick that keeps things simple yet effective.
Absolutely. I like that analogy a lot. It's like upgrading your basic toolkit with a few extra gadgets so you can handle more complex repairs without breaking the bank. And these methods are essentially that kind of toolkit for tackling various prediction tasks.
Also, the content briefly touches on how cost functions play a central role. Whether in linear or logistic regression, the goal is to minimize some measure of error. And here, gradient descent keeps coming up as the go-to method.
Yeah, exactly. That's a recurring theme across many machine learning algorithms, be it regression, classification, or even more exotic models. Optimization, through methods like gradient descent, remains a cornerstone of model training.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Then when it comes to naive Bayes, what's really striking is its simplicity combined with efficiency. Even though it naively assumes independence, it performs exceptionally well in fields like real-time text classification and spam filtering.
Yep, exactly. Right. It's like that classic simple recipe that may not look fancy, but works wonders every time. Despite its naive assumptions, its speed and reliability keep it relevant, especially in scenarios where quick decisions are a must.
Absolutely. And then there's KNN, which, while being one of the simplest approaches, can be computationally demanding. It's the perfect example of trading off learning time for prediction time, something that definitely has implications in practical applications.
Right, exactly. It's like having a vast encyclopedia stored in memory and then flipping through the pages every time you need an answer. You get accurate, context-sensitive results, but at the cost of speed and memory usage.
Yeah, that hits the nail on the head. Wrapping it all up, this thorough look at machine learning fundamentals not only reinforces the importance of selecting the right algorithm based on your data and problem type, but also shows us how foundational techniques like regression and gradient descent still drive innovation in more advanced applications, even in fields like intrusion detection, where rapid and robust decision-making is essential.
Absolutely. Well said. It's like these methods form the base layer, and then you can innovate from there with more complex methods when needed. In a way, understanding these core concepts is the first step toward mastering more specialized applications down the line.
Definitely. I think this conversation really underscores how each algorithm, be it the straightforward linear regression or the more nuanced KNN, has its place, strengths, and limitations. And that balance is what makes the field both challenging and exciting.
Exactly. Totally. For anyone diving into machine learning, appreciating these trade-offs, and understanding the underlying math and logic can empower you to pick the right tool for the task. It's really the essence of practical data science.
Absolutely, no doubt. And on that note, even though some might debate the merits of those strong assumptions in naive Bayes compared to the flexibility of non-parametric methods, it all boils down to the application domain, available data, and computational resources.
Yes? All right, that was a deep dive into the mechanics behind these algorithms. It's been fun unpacking everything from cost functions to gradient descent and seeing how each piece fits into the overall puzzle of machine learning.
Agreed, absolutely. Yeah, this discussion really highlights that while the theoretical underpinnings can seem dry at first, the practical implications are immense, especially when you think about applications ranging from predicting fuel efficiency to detecting intrusions in computer systems.
Right on. And it's exciting to think about how these foundational techniques continue to evolve and spur further developments in AI. Each model, as simple as it may seem, is a building block for the sophisticated systems we see today.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, here's to the power of fundamentals in driving forward technological progress, and to our endless pursuit of finding that perfect balance between simplicity and complexity in machine learning.
Cheers to that.